And it's a beautiful morning here in Tel Aviv, and it's getting a little bit quieter. And I have the pleasure and honor to host as my guest on Life Sciences Today podcast, Miha Štajdohar. Miha, you're in Ljubljana, right?
Yes, I'm based in Ljubljana, Slovenia.
And Miha is the CTO and co-founder of Genialis. And today we're going to learn a bit more about what they're doing, which is actually some amazing things. And so I think I just want to start off with learning a bit more about you, uh, how you had a journey to be one of the co-founders of Genialis.
Um, I'll start by welcoming all the listeners. So Genialis is the RNA biomarker company. We build AI-driven biomarkers that predict treatment response and help match patients to therapies. But the road to get here, wasn't exactly straight. It started with my PhD in AI. Even though I did my PhD in AI, I was drawn towards biomedicine. I wanted my work to make an impact on patient lives. So even 15 years ago, as a grad student, I was already applying machine learning to gene expression profiles. At that time, we had different technology. Those were microarrays. Today, we work with RNA-seq data. But nonetheless, right, we are using the same techniques we did back then in the lab. One of my first papers in 2010 combined network analysis and machine learning to gain new insight into two major types of acute leukemia, myeloid and lymphoblastic, right? And that's really how it all started, because back in the lab, we had some pretty exciting machine learning technology that we believed had real potential. Genialis was a university spin-out. We were testing whether there was some market appetite for the technologies we had in the lab. And in the beginning, we really were a software company. We had some mixed results. The early days were tough. We learned biologists are not really eager to pay for software, which is a problem when that's your business model. I think that's still true today. At about that time, in the early days of Genialis, I was invited to do a postdoc at Baylor College of Medicine. And I welcomed the opportunity, even though I had a new startup that I was running, right? Especially, I guess, since our software wasn't selling all that well back then. So my family and I moved to Houston. My wife was 7 months pregnant at the time. I'm incredibly grateful for her support and patience and just willingness to move overseas. I moved there with a colleague and his family. So together we started promoting our software stack on campus. To our surprise, right, some labs adopted it, quite some labs on campus. And one of those labs was the lab of Raphael Rosengarten, who is today our CEO. Raphael really was one of our early adopters. He believed in the tech so much that when his tenure ended, he joined us, and together we funded Genialis in the US. That was a major milestone for us. We raised seed funding. The aim was to scale the software business, but we soon realized that as a startup with limited resources, you need to focus, right? You can't just sell general purpose software for biologists. And together with our partners, we found a niche in precision oncology. Some would call it focus, some would call it a pivot. We changed the business model significantly, right? The problem was better defined than before. Before we really were agnostic of the problem. We were just selling bioinformatics tools, but now we focused in patients and how they benefit, how they respond to treatment. So the task was clear, right? We realized that DNA biomarkers that are still predominantly used today are not enough, that you need more power. more like RNA gives you a much better dynamic readout of disease biology. So
This
it
was back,
shows
when was this? How long ago
that
was it?
was about 5 years ago. So for the first half of our lifetime, we were selling software, and then we slowly transitioned into this knowledge company. At that point, about 5 years ago, also Raphael took on the role of being the CEO, and he led us through the pivot. So we really transitioned. If we sold software back then, we sold AI models today. So I guess that was the moment we became the RNA biomarker company we are today.
That's an extraordinary story, because 5 years ago, I remember reading a paper talking about the predictive power of biomarkers in clinical trials. The conclusion of the paper was that it's like so.
Yeah.
So it was like there was a lot of hope like 5 years ago, but this paper like did like a longitudinal analysis of trials using biomarkers, and it's not nothing big to write home about.
Yeah, and even though that's the case, all oncology trials today use biomarkers, but they are based on single analytes. It could be a single mutation, it could be a single protein marker, and hence the response rates are modest, at about 30%, right? People respond. And it's not that the drugs are necessarily bad. We have some pretty good drugs on the market. It's just we're giving them to the wrong people.
That is actually a perfect way to present your value proposition, to get the right people to the right drugs, get the right people to the right drugs, not the drugs to the people, but the right people to the right drugs.
Yeah, and it's both, right? Our customers are both pharma and diagnostics. We target the two verticals. And with pharma, it's about getting drugs through clinical trials, which we know is incredibly costly and time-consuming and has a high risk of failure. So we enrich clinical trials by helping select the responders, the patients that will respond. We improve efficacy, which makes trial also faster and smaller and more likely to succeed. If you can increase efficacy, you need fewer patients. So you can start your trial faster, right? Run it with the same power and lower efficacy. Another thing we do with pharma is indication expansion. Many cancers today, even though they're in different indications in different tissues, have very similar biology. So
Right.
the same drug can work in multiple tissues.
You can repurpose, right? You can repurpose it across different.
Repurpose drugs or work with the pharma partners from the get-go to identify the tissues where they will see the highest enrichment.
Right, and actually it enables you. I was just wondering if people are actually doing this, because I had a guest on my show a few weeks ago who's doing actually something totally different, rare genetic diseases in the eye. But they developed a platform actually that can address a whole line of indications. And it seems to me that you can actually probably actually work, go horizontally and go to a farm and say, hey, you can instead of repurposing 5 years later or 10 years later, you can say right now I'm developing a platform for 5 different indications. Is that right?
It's similar in a way. We usually start working with pharma when they've already selected one indication, right? Let's say they have a trial in gastric cancer. But then we can help them identify the other tissues where the drug could benefit, and we plan together future clinical trials for the same asset.
Right, and so it enables them to sort of like do some parallel processing on the.
And one technology we use for that are digital patients. What we can do is we can take standard patients that were treated with the standard of care, chemo, right? And we could simulate how this cohort, how the patients in this cohort would respond to their specific drug, so that we can, using the power analysis, we can define the cohort size to show enrichment and to plan a study in this specific indication.
That's a powerful model when you combine the two techniques, digital twins and the predictive ability of your supermodel.
Yeah, it's the underlying technology is the same, is the model of disease biology, right? It's the application then that's different. And maybe I can spend some time explaining the diagnostics vertical.
So tell us about diagnostics. So you have two kinds of customers. You have pharmas that are trying to get through clinical trials faster and maybe expand their portfolio in the future. So what do you do with diagnostics companies?
So with diagnostics is identifying the right patients for existing drugs, and it's enabling precision in the clinic, right? Improving patient outcomes, reducing unnecessary treatment. We partner with several diagnostics companies to develop companion diagnostics and LDTs. So here we go through the process of validating the biomarkers, right, together, which it starts with retrospective validation on existing data. And at that point, when we have confirmation from the retrospective validation, we would typically partner with the diagnostics company for the analytical validation, make sure the tests are consistent, and then prospective validation in clinical trials to get a test on the market.
Right. Actually, it's actually true validation if you're doing a clinical trial to validate the diagnostic, right? So it's actually not. It's much better than prospective because you're not looking at data and hypothesizing that this might work. You're actually doing it might be an open label trial, but still you're validating the diagnostic for the trial, for the indication.
And this is the main reason for diagnostics partnerships, is to share the costs of prospective validation, the clinical trials that are required for that.
Right, right, and that's actually a very powerful go-to-market, which sort of brings me to my next question. Is you pretty much said it, but so I sort of want to crystallize this for our listeners. Is you actually have you create value in two ways for two different kind of customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for pharma, how do you create value?
So for pharma is helping them succeed in clinical trials, right? Making them faster, smaller, de-risk clinical trials. And with diagnostics is developing tests, diagnostics tests.
That actually those two value propositions actually pair very well together, because it means that the diagnosis is kind of like lagging the sponsor deal flow, but eventually they'll catch up, and then the sponsors will start using the diagnostics that were validated with your technology. Is that right?
Correct. That's a great observation. It's often that we start with the pharma partner, but then we bring on the diagnostics company when we start developing the companion diagnostic for the drug that's being developed.
Right. So it's actually it's a great way of getting two for the price of one, right?
We have the right technology to serve both markets. So
someone actually told me last week. He said people were talking about he's like a professional salesman. He's one of the best salespeople in the world that I know, and he said something. We had a really interesting observation, which kind of was ringing in my head for this show. And he said, most people talk about their close rate and say being able to close like 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, and enterprise sales maybe 1 out of 5. If you're a dominant player. like Oracle, but he said, no, he said, I can close 5 in 1. I said, what do you mean? He said,
Mm.
I can get a customer and I can get 4 more customers out of that one customer because I work really hard on, horizontally and referring between them. So it seems to me you're doing
Yeah.
2x.
We call this a land and expand business model because typically we would start with one asset within the pharma company, and then we would scale to all their other verticals because they recognize the value we bring and want to use us on all their other assets. So the technology really allows us to scale rapidly, and the business model that we have is a platform and services business, essentially. At the core is technology we call the supermodel, which is a model of models, hence the name. And we all heard about large language models, right? LLMs. But this model, it's a model of disease biology. It's a large molecular model. It understands cancer at the molecular level. Practically, what it does is it takes on the input, it takes gene expression profiles, and then it quantifies the hallmarks of cancer. It just maps this massive multidimensional space into a lower dimensional space that's explainable, right? So it's two things that are important that this model does. One is this dimensionality reduction. It allows us to build biomarkers that work with small clinical data sets, which is, in oncology, that's often the case. It allows us to build just-in-time biomarkers that are ready when the clinical trial ends. And the second thing it does, it really improves generalizability so that our biomarkers don't just work on one trial or on one cohort, but also new cohorts, new diverse patient populations. So this supermodel is embedded in every biomarker we develop. It's like an operating system that allows us to rapidly develop new markers. That allows us then also to scale horizontally, right? We can use the same platform and apply it to different mechanisms, to different drugs.
But when you say new biomarkers, you're not actually developing the liquid chemistry to do it. You're actually describing what a new biomarker would look like. Can you explain to me what that means? Because I barely passed chemistry in college, right? So
yeah, so we built AI models that predict response to treatment. And we use RNA sequencing technology to capture the tumor samples and to measure the gene expression. And so for this wet lab part, we partner with diagnostics companies. And we provide the key ingredient, which is the machine learning models that gives you the probability of response.
So you're basically telling the lab, so you do from your machine learning models, you basically say, here are the parameters that you need to measure, and you guys need to develop the reagents and everything else that in order to do that. Is that correct?
And that's correct. But we use existing platforms for measuring gene expression. We don't need to deviate from standard protocols that diagnostics companies already have implemented. So we're just building a layer on top, a decision-making layer on top of the existing tests that are available commercially today.
So you're basically saying you need to measure these signals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on the basis of that, you will then be able to create a new marker which is specialized for a particular indication.
Correct. So from these signals, we apply our supermodel, which characterizes the tumor in terms of quantified disease biology features or the hallmarks of cancer, if you want. And from these hallmarks, we then fine-tune this foundation model to different specific assets, for different specific drugs that we work on with our partners.
That's a very powerful model because it enables you to expand almost without limit, right? Because you have a huge model. So for our listeners, when you say high dimensionality and then reducing dimensionality, so give me a couple of numbers. Give me the high dimension number and the low dimension number. What does this mean?
Yeah, so we have about 60,000 known genes in our cells that can be expressed. So for every tumor sample, you get 60,000 numbers that tells you to what extent a particular gene is expressed. But we can convert that into a few hundred features which could tell you some examples, right? Which could tell you, are there immune cells present in the tumor microenvironment? Are there blood vessels in the microenvironment? Which biologies are expressed? Is the DNA damage and repair mechanism damaged? Does it work as it should? Things like that, right? We can characterize the biology of the tumor.
So you're going for 60,000 to a few hundred. That's what? That's it's a 2 order of magnitude reduction in dimension, right?
Correct. Yep.
And that makes a huge, just for people who are maybe not 100% familiar with machine learning, 2x, 2 orders of magnitude reduction reduce the amount of computation you need to do by a lot.
And also just we work with small data sets because every patient in the clinical trial is expensive, right, and precious. And typically we would get cohorts with several dozen to several hundred patients so that you can't really work with multidimensional data in that setting when it's too noisy to train models that would then generalize and translate across patient cohorts.
So you're creating a tremendous amount of value with this platform, really, and that sort of brings me to the next question, which is how do you capture that value? So you mentioned before that it's like a platform kind of model. So without, you don't have to go into numbers. I charge X per Y, but what is your method for capturing value from your customers?
I mentioned we have a platform and services business. We would license the supermodel and the biomarkers that are built on top. We have different licensing models that are tailored to different use cases. For example, we would start in translational research within pharma and then progress through clinical trials and ultimately have tests on the market. So for tests, you can imagine royalties. For clinical trials, the milestones. And in translational research is mostly some fixed license plus professional services model to use this technology.
So that's actually really powerful. That's a very compelling business model because a lot of when you look at say the CRO market, which is totally different, but you look at CROs, they like charge per seats, but here you're actually like charging per transaction almost. And if you go by milestones, so it's like not transactions. I think the better word I have in my mind right now is outcomes. So you're actually billing by outcomes, aren't you?
Yes, we always define milestones based on the inflection in value, on inflection points, essentially.
And that's a really powerful thing because this industry has gotten used to paying lots of money for, to being told the time of day. A client of mine, who, by the way, this is actually kind of timely. He did huge construction projects in Iran back in the time of the Shah. And he made a fortune doing project management of large construction projects. So he said that basically, what's a good consultant? A good consultant, you ask them the time of day, and they'll tell you, look at your watch, and they'll tell you that it's 11:27. Okay, that's a good. So basically, yeah, he said, and so I said, okay, so what's a bad consultant? Is a bad consultant will look at your watch, tell you it's 11:27, then steal your watch and run away with your watch. That's the difference between a good consultant and a bad consultant. And he run 40 years ago.
Yeah, so in our case, I've talked a lot about the machine learning aspect, but what we bring to the table is, and it's crucial, right, is the domain, the biology expertise that we have in-house. We really bring together these two worlds from machine learning and then life sciences. We have MDs, right, on the team. We have biologists, biochemists, bioinformaticians, computational biologists employed so that we can really drive value. When we work with pharma, we work hand in hand to understand their domain, their specific problems, right? Getting here to your suggestion or advice you had earlier, we not only give our partners numbers or probabilities of response, but we always explain the model and we provide insights into the mechanisms and how the system behaves and what are the pathways that are important for the model to make decisions. Explainability is a big part of model explainability, is a big part of our working process.
It's huge. And this is something that came up in a conversation we had last week, and I want to share with our listeners, is that there are a lot of companies out there doing prediction, and just it's basically mathematics. So they're working with numbers and they're doing prediction, and it's hard to explain. And what really was this huge aha moment when I talked to you was that you basically have a physical model. And that as a physicist, any good physicist has 4 or 5 physical models in his head, but making these predictions based on the biology at the level of the cell, right, is huge, because it means that it's rooted in reality. It's not rooted in what some mathematical model thinks might be a good way to predict something. And that's a huge advantage, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so customers benefit from the extra knowledge, but it's also a requirement. So we have a test that was approved by the FDA for clinical trial use. And model explainability was crucial to get this test approved. We had to show the mechanics of the model to the FDA, in addition to demonstrating enrichment, efficacy, and so on, right? But they really wanted to see the mechanics of the model and how it makes decisions.
And that's something that FDA has gotten more and more interested in the past few years with machine learning slash AI products. And I think it will just get more and more, the more AI and machine learning we do to develop better therapeutics, it'll become more and more a basic requirement. In the next year to 18 months, what are 3 things Miha wants to do for his customers?
So I mentioned today DNA biomarkers are prevalent in clinical trials and just generally in oncology use. So I want to see more RNA biomarkers used in active clinical trials, helping our pharma partners run faster, run smarter studies, improve success rates. We believe here RNA biomarkers, right, can capture the complex biology of cancer and significantly improve the outcomes of clinical trials. Then also, I want to see the first commercial launch of a therapy with our biomarker guiding patient selection. So far we are in clinical trials. I want to see some of those trials get to the clinic and deliver real world impact for patients. Our vision is really a world where healthcare delivers the best possible outcomes for patients and families and communities. So I want to see some of that translate to people that will benefit. And finally, to broaden our partnerships beyond oncology. So RNA biomarkers have potential in other diseases. We want to help drive precision medicine in immunology, potentially rare diseases and beyond.
So you have your work cut out for you. So how many trials are running right now with your technology?
One. We
One.
have one active clinical trial, and with all the other partners, we are in translational research.
Right. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a tremendous, I think, horizon in front of you with a lot of promise. And it's been a pleasure, Miha, to talk to you. It's exciting because this is like exciting stuff. And I think the potential to bring the right patients to the right drugs is huge. Just flipping the pitch, flipping the script, and this kind of thing is, I think, itself an ingenious approach. And we'll go live with this in about 2 weeks. I had no idea before I started the podcast how much time was actually involved in preparation. That's probably a good application for AI, which I should do. Develop an app to automate the whole process of the back end. But still, expect to see the podcast in about 2 weeks. Life Sciences Today is available on all the major podcast channels on Spotify and YouTube. And
I've been listening to a few episodes.
Yeah, was it interesting?
Absolutely. The one you mentioned also on rare diseases, quite interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I mean that their platform approach is like, he's cracking something. People were telling me, oh, you can't make money on rare diseases. So I don't know. Tell that to the people with P&H Therapeutics. Okay, they make a lot of money. So
yeah, and it's kind of, I think we share the vision that in the future, all medicine will be precision medicine, right? Every patient's disease is unique. So even not just rare diseases, right? But the whole field will have to do a lot better characterizing individual diseases people have, and designing treatment that are custom for every patient.
that's right. So a treatment of one. I think that's what I think that's what Steve Jobs was trying to do towards the end to develop precision medication for himself. And I know there are people working on that, and I agree with you. That's probably going to be the answer. And wow. So
thank you for the opportunity to present our value propositions and our vision of how we hope to change our future for the better.
Miha, thank you for being on the show. You've been a tremendous guest. You're very, very, very clear on what you do. And I think the future is going to be extremely bright for you guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day.